Today I'm going to be working on this gorgeous French provincial dresser. I found this piece on Facebook Marketplace and I paid $175 for it, which you might be thinking that's a little bit high, but considering it's a high quality solid wood dresser and I'm going to be selling it for about $1,400, so I'm still making a pretty good profit. I prepped this piece by doing a light hand sanding with 120 grit sandpaper all over the entire piece. For the paint, I'm using Fusion Mineral Midnight Blue with a little bit of the coal black mixed in. And I'm also using my favorite Palm Pro Zibra paintbrush. My number one tip for using this paint is that it needs to be thinned down before you use it. So they actually have an extender product that you can use, which works really well, and it's just a little bottle and you put a couple of drops in your paint. That's a great product and I use that all the time. But if I do happen to run out, just using plain old water actually works pretty well, almost as well. So you can use that also if you don't want to spend the money on another product or if you just don't have it on hand at the time. The extender costs about $7 and it does last for quite a few projects, so it's a really affordable product to use. And I recommend getting it if you are going to be using Fusion Mineral regularly. But if you don't have it yet and you want to just go ahead and get started, using water is perfectly fine. So I don't usually measure anything out, but I fill about a cup full of the paint and then do my mix-ins, which in this case was just a little splash of the coal black, just to darken up that navy color, just a touch. And then another splash of water, and I mix it thoroughly. So it should be a very nice consistency. Like, you don't want it watery, but you just want to thin it down just a touch. And then you'll see it should go on nice and buttery smooth, just like this. The way you know if you've thinned it down enough is how quickly it dries. If it seems like it's drying too quickly for you to blend in the new lines, then that means it's not thinned down enough and you need to add a little bit more extender or a little touch more of water. If it's going on super smooth and you can easily brush in new lines over your entire surface, then that means it's perfectly thinned down. If it's dripping a lot, then it's probably too thin and you need to add a little bit more paint. But basically you can do an entire surface without worrying about anything drying if it's the perfect consistency. So I'm doing one drawer at a time and I can easily do the entire drawer, even brushing back over some areas at one time. Without worrying about anything drying or, and I'm not getting any drips, as you can see. And then once I move on to the side, I can pretty much do the entire surface without worrying about any drying spots. So that's how you know that you're at the right consistency. Knowing the consistency of your paint is actually a really important thing to think about, because you could be having a lot of trouble with paint. It might be too thick, not going on well and smooth, or too thin and dripping. And all you need to do to solve the problem is add either water or some sort of other product or mix in a little more paint, etc. So it can really solve a lot of problems if you know what consistency the paint should be at that you're working with. Another crucial thing to know is what brush to use. And I highly recommend these Zibra brushes that I use. I tried a lot of brushes out when I first started and nothing works as well as these. And as long as you take care of them, they will last a very long time. So of course I have them linked in the description. They're also available at most hardware and home improvement stores. But if you'd like to support me, I would really appreciate it. And I'll have that link in the description for you. Once you're ready to get started painting, I like to start at the top of a piece. Right here, I'm just doing this little trim part on the bottom. But for a flat surface, I start at the top and I just work my way down. That way, if there's any drips, you can smooth those out as you go. And I just kind of go with the wood grain, always making sure I'm going in the same direction. In this case, it's vertical, and I just keep going over it until it's nice and smoothed out. Now, this is the first coat, so whether you're using a primer or just doing an extra coat of the paint, it's not going to look perfectly smooth after the first coat. So don't be alarmed if it looks very splotchy and streaky. You need to do 2 to 3 coats of paint on every project, and it won't look perfectly smooth and even until the third coat is finished. After you finish that first coat of paint, there's a very important step that I always do that you should never skip, which is doing a light hand sanding with a 220 grit sandpaper all over the surface of your piece. So I mainly do the flat sections. I don't worry too much about getting every single crevice or detail. It's mainly just to make sure that you don't have any lap lines or drips, and that everything lays nice and smoothly. This step is really important if you're using a mineral paint or a chalk paint like Fusion Mineral or Annie Sloan. But if you're using an enamel, you can skip this step. Now all I'm doing is just going very lightly in the same direction that I painted all over the entire piece. Once you've finished with the sanding, take a soft microfiber cloth and thoroughly clean it top to bottom so that you get all the dust and residue off. Next, I like to apply my wood filler to any nicks, dings, or dents in the piece, just very minor ones. Any major damage, I'll do that before I even get started painting. But once you put on that first coat of paint or primer, it really highlights any dents or dings for you so that you can see them a lot better and make sure you fill in every spot. So then all you do once that is dry is you take the 220 grit sandpaper and sand it just enough to where it's smooth and level with the paint. You don't want to sand too much off, just until it's nice and level and it looks flat and feels smooth when you run your finger over it. Once everything is sanded back smooth again, take your microfiber cloth again and make sure you clean it really well, getting every little bit of dust and residue off the entire piece. So you're ready for doing the second coat. Now I'm going to start on the second coat, which I'm just going to paint it on exactly the same as the first coat. This is one of my favorite parts because it really starts coming together. After the second coat, you get to cover up the streaks and the blotchy looking first coat, and then all the filler that you used. And that vision that I had in my mind when I first started the project really starts coming together once you apply the second coat. So it's one of my favorite parts in the whole entire process of refinishing. And I love to just come out here and do the painting part of my pieces when it's really nice out. I open up the door so there's fresh air. I can hear the birds. I put on some music maybe, and I just really get into that therapeutic creativity mode and focus on what I'm doing. It always makes me think of that Fort Minor song, Remember the Name, where he's like, it takes 10% skill, 15% concentrated power of will, 50% pain, and then it's 5% pleasure. And I think I'm missing something, but it's completely relatable to furniture refinishing because pretty much 95% of the project is pretty tedious or difficult, and it takes a lot of skill and critical thinking sometimes. And then really the part that I can just totally zen out and not even think about and really, really enjoy is the painting part. But that's a very small part of the entire process. So if you're just starting out, don't get discouraged. You just have to push through the difficult parts or the tedious parts until you get to the really fun parts. But I promise it'll be worth it. So I'm just going to finish up the second coat. I'll let that dry, do another light sanding with the same 220 grit sandpaper, and then I'll do the third and final coat, which I will not be sanding, and I'll be applying the top coat once that's dry. One tip I want to point out is to always make sure to paint the underside trim of your piece, especially on these curvy pieces. that really shows, and you want to make sure it has that final finished look by making sure that's painted. I didn't show it in this video, but the best way to do that is to just tip your piece backwards so you can easily see the bottom trim and what needs to be painted. Now I'm ready for the top coat. For the top coat, I'm going to be using a water-based polyurethane in a satin finish. I usually just use a foam applicator to apply the top coat. It works just fine and they're very affordable. You can find them on Amazon or at any of your local home improvement stores. You want to apply a fairly thin coat of the top coat. I recommend doing about 2 to 3 coats, really just depending on how it looks and your preference, kind of what you're looking for. It should look like that top drawer, like a satiny, silky, smooth, with a light sheen, not really a glossy shine and not dull, but a nice light satin sheen. So you can really see the difference. This top drawer is finished and that next drawer is not. There's just kind of a smoother satiny sheen on the top drawer as opposed to the lower drawers. And it just gives it that like really classy high-end look. So you want to make sure that you're working in small sections. The drawers are really easy to do because you can do about half of a drawer and then move on to the other half. You just want to make sure that you overlap the wet section to the new section and kind of smooth it all in. You don't have to work it too much, but just make sure that you really blend, the first section that you did with the second section. The sides and the top are a little bit trickier because you have a bigger surface to work with. So you're still going to do sections. You're just going to start at the top or one side and you do one small section at a time. I do about a third and then I smooth that all out and then I move on to the middle, making sure that I just brush up into the previous section so that it's all smoothed out. And it'll look very similar to this. Like you're definitely going to see parts that look uneven. It's going to look very milky, especially on a dark color, but that's fine. That's exactly how it's supposed to look. And just like you did with the paint, after each coat, you're going to do a very light sanding. You could use a 400 or 600 grit sandpaper, and that would work just as well. Now, if you're using the old hardware, like I love to do, especially if it's high quality brass hardware that just fits the piece perfectly, like these gorgeous handles, I have a secret formula that I use for cleaning them. and that is water with a little bit of vinegar and a splash of Dawn dish soap. So I just let them soak in that for about 2 to 3 hours, and then I take like a little scrubby brush and I just scrub them clean, getting in all the crevices and details. Once they start drying, if you notice a slightly greenish residue on them in the crevices, what you can do is toss them back in the water and then take a soft cloth and a toothpick, and you can kind of scrape out the crevices. It should come off pretty easily, but if it seems like it's really stuck, just toss them back in the water and let them soak a few more hours and then try it again. Once they're completely clean, I take a soft cloth and I sometimes dip it a little bit in the solution, and I just kind of polish the raised parts of the hardware to give them that antique look. I usually let them dry overnight just so they're 100% dry before I install them on the piece. The next thing I'm going to do is line the inside of the drawers. I don't do this on every single piece. It's really just a preference per piece. And I think this gorgeous liner is really going to elevate this piece. So lining the drawers is a whole nother video in itself. But basically you want to measure and cut. That's the obvious part. And then you want to carefully put them in the drawers, and you want to start in the middle with a little flat scraper thing, kind of like this. You can also use your hand and smooth out any bubbles or bumps that you can feel. Then you want to press the sides of the paper as close as you can into the corners of the drawer, so it's as flat as possible. And then I use a craft knife and you cut off the excess. I'm still not a professional at this part, and sometimes it takes me multiple tries to get one drawer perfect, but it just takes a little extra time, and it really does elevate the look of the piece and gives it that high-end, high-quality feel. When you're choosing a liner, you do want to make sure that it's high quality. There are some really cheap products out there that are just terrible to work with and don't stick well. So I have some listed, the ones that I've used on my Amazon shop. So you can check those out, or just check out the brands that they are so you know which ones are good. And now finally, I'm just doing a quick clean of the inside of the drawers. Depending on the piece and how dirty it is, I might actually spray it down with a hose, but in this case it was very well kept and it just needed a light cleaning with my microfiber cloth. And then I'm going to use a wood wax, which will protect the wooden sliders and also help the drawers slide more smoothly. So I'm going to apply the wax on the inside of the piece, just like this. And then I'm also going to apply it on the bottom part of the track of the drawer. So it gets both sides, and that will help the drawer slide as smoothly as possible. And then another secret little tip that I like to do is add these little plastic drawer gliders. They're just these tiny little things, and you just tap them in right on the edge of the inside of your piece, and that helps the drawer glide even more smoothly. Once you've got all the drawers gliding smoothly, you can step back and enjoy the final result. Thank you so much for watching my video. I hope you enjoyed it and that maybe you learned something too. I've linked all the products that I used in my description. You can also find some of them on my Amazon shop. And please feel free to reach out and let me know if you'd like me to send you a specific link. Also, let me know in the comments what you think about this piece, or if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you like learning about furniture refinishing, and stay tuned for the next video. Thanks again for watching. See you on the next flip.